Welcome to the Carey Nieuwhof Leadership Podcast on YouTube. My name is Carey Nieuwhof, and my goal is to help you lead like never before. So what I do every week is I sit down with world-class leaders and church leaders, business leaders, and I talk to them about what made them who they are and try to have the conversation with them that you would have if you got to sit down for lunch with them or have dinner with them or really got to spend some time with them. So we go into the backstory and we explore what made them who they are and some of the principles they've learned along the way. So if you enjoy this episode, I would love for you to like it, to subscribe, and also to share it with your friends. And in the meantime, here's today's episode. Well, Rachel, welcome back. It's so good to have you on the podcast again.
Thank you, Carey. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I kind of feel like what you and everybody at Ramsey Group does is sort of like the weight loss industry. You just have perpetual job security. And it's the same issues over and over again, right? Like it's stuff your dad's been talking about for how long now is it that he started doing this?
25 years, I guess, almost 30 years. But no, I guess it'll be around 30 years. Yeah. I know. We always laugh. He always laughs. That's exactly what he says. He's like, me and Jenny Craig have a lifelong jobs for sure.
As long as there are people and money, there will always be money challenges, right? Yep. Yeah. And so we made it through 2020, assuming this airs at some point, right? You got a new book out and the whole deal. But it was just a year. And, I don't even know what words you use anymore, but it was just a year. And how did people's money issues from a macro standpoint, looking back with just a tiny bit of distance now, how did they get better or worse since the crisis hit? What did you see accelerated and what did you see get better in people's finances?
Yeah, I think the pandemic exposed a lot. Warren Buffett always said that when the tide goes out, you can tell who's skinny dipping. And I love that quote because it just kind of exposes it all. And for a while, you can kind of get away with some mistakes and kind of cover up some stupid decisions because you're making money, the economy was good, and you can just kind of keep going. When everything halts, it really makes you look in the mirror and say, oh, wow, okay, what am I doing? And for a lot of Americans, they were in a really tough position, whether they were laid off or furloughed, or just the overriding fear of the fact of, wow, we have no savings. We are living paycheck to paycheck. And if something were to happen, are we going to be okay? And so what I hope it did for a lot of people is kind of had this like no matter what moment in their life where they say, okay, you know what? No matter what, I'm not going back to how it was. No matter what, I will always have savings in the bank. No matter what, I'm going to work my way out of debt. Like those no matter what statements is what I pray people had. But obviously, I mean, the sad thing is humans are humans. And I think, we saw it in the Great Recession in 2008. Credit card debt was right back up in about 2010 to where it was. And so if we don't change our habits, we're going to go right back to what we were doing. And change is hard. Like it's uncomfortable to say, I'm going to do something totally different with my money. That's scary. Yeah. And so just getting to that point though, where you make that change and take that leap and knowing that there's hope on the other side, like the sacrifices you make now, there's a reason you're making them because the outcome is greater and better than your current circumstance. But sadly, people will go right back to what they were doing. But my prayer is that they had some moments where they said, you know what, no matter what, will this happen again to me?
So I'm curious, because this is the biggest crisis in my life, and I would assume your life, at least globally, right, so far, hopefully for a long time to come. But I want to ask this question. I don't know 100% where it's going, but it's kind of interesting. And if it's a dead end, we'll just move on. But imagine going back to March 1st, 2020. Okay, we didn't really know this was coming down the pipe. Like everyone knew, okay, there's this virus that's sort of in Seattle, but like everything's still kind of normal, right? Stock market's riding high. Is there any advice you would give yourself or other people saying, hey, in that moment, I wish we had more of this or less of this financially? Like, is there something that looking back, like you've given advice for years now, so's the whole Ramsey Group, but you're like, wow, had we known this was coming, this is what we all should have been looking at. Was there anything like that looking back that now seems even more important than it did before it hit?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, if you could go back to March 1st and scream from the rooftops. I go tactical so easily. That's one reason But I think it's that emergency fund. I think for people that 3 to 6 months of expenses that we teach was so vital because I heard the people that had no debt and had an emergency fund and emotionally, like in their voice, you could hear it so different than the people that didn't. And sadly, the people that didn't, it's not to shame them, but there's a level of terror because the unknown is so right there in front of your face. I mean, I remember one day thinking, next week everything will open back up. Like I remember thinking that in like April. It's like, it'll just be another week. Like, I mean, like it's so wild. And so I think having a buffer between you and life was so much more important than ever in our world today, because it just gave you breathing room. If you had it, if you had that margin, you just had some peace that sadly a lot of people didn't. And a lot of people had made some financial decisions completely out of fear. It was total fear-based, which I understand. That was one thing I was trying to talk people off the ledge, right? Like they're pulling out their 401ks, they're doing stuff completely out of fear. And I'm like, no, we have to focus on the facts. So tactically, I would say that emergency fund. And then I think more on an emotional level, I would say, I would scream from the rooftops March 1st, like, don't let fear be your financial advisor.
What does that mean? Don't let fear be your financial advisor. What? Because people panic, right? They
panic and they make really bad decisions when they panic. And so to look at the facts, and what are the facts? So some people, they stopped everything they're doing. Like some people didn't. Some industries were completely gone. Obviously, hospitality. I mean, there's industries that are just completely slammed. But there's millions of people out of work, but there's millions of people still in their job and still making exactly what they made, but they still froze. So for 7 months, they did nothing because they were in such fear, they were paralyzed, where they could have been completely out of debt. They could have been still working the system and working, but because fear took over, they did nothing. For others, fear took over. And like I said, they're cashing out investments, they're cashing out 401k, and they're penalized out the wazoo for it. And it's like, no, stay and ride the market out. Like that's the one thing we always said. It's just like, ride it out. Because now you look up and we're close to back where we were before. I mean, from the Dow Jones perspective. And so, I kept saying to people, don't let that fear, that emotion drive you. Look at the facts. You have to look at the facts. The fact is, I am going to be unemployed in a month. Like my boss told me, we're being furloughed. Okay, that's a fact. So now what do? Now you save. Take all the money you have, stop paying off debt, you save. Like when you focus on facts, the plan comes into place and gives you a level of control. I think we all got shook to the core that we have no control.
Right.
But there's a level of control we can have with our money, and basing it on facts versus fear is wise.
That's super helpful. And, here we are at the beginning of a brand new year. We don't know what this year is going to hold, but a prediction. And again, things can change between when we recorded this and when it airs. But my guess would be uncertainty. Like, I don't think we're going back to the regular rhythms that we have been used to for years, whether that's politically, economically, now we got industries that are limping for a year, et cetera. So this may just be the same answer you just gave, but looking ahead, what would you be shouting from the rooftops today to leaders to like, guys, pay attention to this?
Yeah, I would say pay attention to your day-to-day decisions. Because those day-to-day decisions can really make a big impact over time. And if you're sloppy in the little things with your money, then your overarching finances could look really sloppy. And so I would say be diligent in this season, because it is a season of uncertainty. So be diligent with that small, mundane tasks day in and day out. Like, I look back on the pandemic, we'll probably get into this stuff later in the interview, but I'm like, I shopped on Amazon way too much during the pandemic. Like, and halfway because I'm like, I was just bored and I was just flipping through. I mean, it was just, I'm like, why? And I'm like that. And if that sloppiness was magnified and continued on for another year, it's not going to like make me bankrupt, but I'm going to make some not smart financial decisions.
You just blew through a whole lot of stuff you didn't need to blow through.
That's exactly right. So I'd say watch the day-to-day part of your money.
Having been through what we've been through, and I've asked so many leaders this question. I'm just curious about you. You've always said a 3 to 6 month emergency fund. Does that number still reign true, or would you say 6 to 9 or 12, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we're still saying 3 to 6 because the prayer would be by 6 months, you've replaced your income in some capacity. It may not be in the job you were in. It may be in a totally different industry, but hopefully within 6 months, there's something that you can do. Because like we said, some industries are gone, but others have exploded and actually were looking for, like they were hiring. And so hopefully within that 6 months, the goal would be to replace the income. And I have faith enough in the economy that hopefully there's a job out there that you can replace the income. Maybe not to the extent it was, but there.
Yeah, and for those of us who are employers, I had one leader said to me, "Yeah, if you made $0 in 6 months, you probably don't have a business anyway, and you should have shut it down, right?" Like, so there is that thought. If your givings as a church leader are $0, like maybe there are deeper issues here.
That's right, exactly.
At that point. Okay, no, that's super helpful. So I love your new book, and thanks for sending me an early copy because it talks about the why of money, just the what of money. And I find that really, really fascinating. Like, it is a little bit like weight loss, right? Like, if we could all figure this out, we'd all be thin, have washboard abs, and, be in fantastic shape and running marathons every day. Like, we know what to do. I know what to do, but I just had pizza for lunch, right? So why do I eat pizza for lunch? I don't know. Like, why do I do that? Is that sort of where this book is coming from?
Yeah, absolutely. I realized for over a decade, I have been out talking about the how-tos of money, how to budget, how to get out of debt, how to invest, how to give. And I realized, 80% of personal finance, it's behavior. 20% of it is head knowledge. So just like you're saying, we know what to do. That's such a small part. Like, we know what to do. But doing it is so difficult. It's so hard. It creates sacrifice. You have to say no to yourself. And there's so much there in the behavior change. So I just started asking the question, okay, well, then why am I doing the behaviors I'm doing? When you start to unpack that and unravel that, kind of go under the surface, for me, there was so many aha moments that I realized, oh, wow, just having this self-awareness of who I am and why I do the things I do with money helps me, because it's not just for self-awareness sake, but it really is to take that and apply it to my life and change my money habits, my money behaviors so that I can win with money faster.
Yeah, I love you've got this thing, and I saw you do it with your dad, which was really interesting. And I think everyone's going to find themselves in the story here because you walk through, you call them, is it 7 money tendencies?
Yes.
That people have. So can we play that game for a little bit? And do you mind sharing a little bit where you fall and kind of walk us through it? You want to start with saver or spender, which is one that almost everyone's familiar with, but hang on, there's more that I'd never thought of. So
yes, yep. Yeah, and I'll say this before we get started, that there's no right or wrong. So some people will think one's better, one's not. No. There's not a right or wrong on the scale. It's just where, and then on most of them, if it's extreme, it can be very unhealthy. So like saver spender, this is a good example. I definitely lean spender, but if I'm an extreme spender, then I'm broke, right? I'm just spending everything I make. So there's a level of a saver that has to be there. So there's a moderation that's good. But yeah, out of saver spender, definitely a spender.
I'm glad you said that, because you would think, talking to Rachel Cruze, and the Ramsey organization, that there is a right answer, and it's saver. If you're a spender, you're a bad person. And why are you even on the show, right? So I love the fact. So none of these have a moral taint to them. They're just our tendencies. And you would be a spender.
Yes, I love it. I love spending money. It's terrible. Okay. But I do. I enjoy it. It's so fun. Oh, so you're a spender.
I'm probably is it like a scale of 1 to 10? Rank yourself?
No, I mean, I have a chart in the book, so you can kind of mark it where you're closest. But yeah.
Okay, so I would say I'm not like a crazy spender, because then you eventually are bankrupt, and we haven't hit that place. But yeah, if it's you want to put it in the bank or whatever. And what do you learn when you figure out, or is that just self-knowledge, naming it and going, yep, I'm a spender?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is that self-knowledge for yourself, to realize that if you're in one of the tendencies and you go extreme, to just have a red flag and be like, okay, yeah, I've been spending, like I just said, the pandemic though, I was spending so much, and then I had to ask myself, Rachel, why am I spending all this money? And one answer one day, I remember I was like, because I'm just bored. And I was like, okay, well, why am I not okay being bored? Because I just don't want to sit by myself with my thoughts, I want to be busy. Well, why do I want to be busy? You start to kind of unravel of who you are and why you're doing the things you're doing. So there's a level of that self-awareness to kind of have that red flag, but also for the people around you, especially if you're married, you can start to have this language with your spouse to be like, oh, wow, that's why they're doing the things they're doing. And there's a level of empathy that comes when you can kind of not categorize them by any means, but have words around their values and why they tend to do things with money. There's just this level of okay, I get it. And I can empathize more than just thinking you're this alien. And I have no clue why you handle money that way. There's a level of empathy that comes with it.
Are there and there may not be a good answer to this, but are there predictors or life circumstances or personality traits that tend to draw people toward the saver or the spender side of the spectrum?
I think so, for sure. I think when I line up all the tendencies, the 7, you can definitely tell personality-wise people that lean more one side of each spectrum than the other. So we'll go down them, I know, but scarcity mindset, saver mindset. There's a theme definitely through people. And so I don't know, big
I'm just saying, if you grew up in poverty, are you more likely to be a saver? Or Like, I'm just curious. Have you connected the dots, or have studies connected the dots to particular personalities?
There's some, yeah. In your childhood, I walked through the 4 money classrooms of how you grew up with money and how that shapes who you are today. So what I found, what was interesting through it all, is a lot of people either mirrored very similarly what the parents did, and they just kind of kept the same habits, the same environment, or they did the complete opposite. I never really found this medium. It was either extreme one way or the other, which is so fascinating. They either just repelled against it and just did. So the poverty thing, I talked to a few people that grew up in severe poverty, and they did, of course, the exact opposite of what their parents did. They work all the time. I mean, there's a security and money for them and working and all of that they're because they didn't have that. And so that's another thing, is that like some of it isn't rational. Like I was talking to one person, and they were very well off financially, but there was still they still would pay their bills like $5 more every month just to make sure like it's covered. Like it makes no sense, but because of how they grew up, they went to this extreme.
Yeah, I talked to one leader, this just comes to mind, and again, very financially well off, doesn't need to worry, but only recently, entrepreneur, stopped taking ketchup packs and that from restaurants, just because you never know when you're going to go without, right? But that was her childhood, like growing up in a trailer and a mom who never had enough. No, it's just really interesting. So we're both spenders. Okay, let's do nerd or free spirit. What does that mean?
Yeah, so this is usually around budgeting specifically. So the nerd is the one that loves numbers. They probably have Excel. Like naturally, they're very organized people. They know what they're doing. They love research. They love numbers. They love being in control. So the budget is like, yes, game on. It's not a struggle for them. The free spirit is like the doesn't care for details. Just kind of want to live life by the moment. A little bit more of like the YOLO, like, or it's all gonna be okay. It's all gonna be okay. It's all gonna be okay. That's the free spirit. And I actually lean free spirit too.
Okay, well, so am I. I'm like, and it's so funny because I can read a P&L. I had to, right? Like for years leading a church, and particularly a large one, it's like, you better be good with that stuff, and you're handling other people's money. You're a steward, you're responsible. But like so it's that pervasive, like, it's all going to work out in the end. And that created a bit of tension in my marriage. So my wife would be more on the saver side, and she would be more on the nerd side, although she's not a nerd, but she'd like, we need a written plan. And you're the one who, I've heard you say it 1,000 times, it's like you need a written budget, but that is a discipline for you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Budgeting is the number one part of personal finance that it's the hardest for me. I mean, after 10 years now of doing it consistently with Winston, it's now a part of our life. Like it's our rhythm. In fact, like I feel like if it was gone now, I feel like I would be like, oh gosh, I kind of need it back. Like it's that ingrained in who I am now. But my natural bent for sure is a free spirit.
There's enough there. It'll all work out.
It's all gonna be fine.
Okay, good. Well, I hope leaders are reading their own mail as we're going through this list, because I thought it was a fun list. Okay, third category, money tendency, is experiences or things.
Yeah, so when you look at your spending, where would you value putting money the most? Do you enjoy buying experiences? So going to the zoo with your kids, or going to a movie, going out to a nice dinner, having a massage, like, or I don't know, vacation, like whatever it is. It's just like, yes, there's an experience there. When you walk away, you have memories, but you may not have anything tangible. Or do you value buying things instead? Is there like, you want to put money, it's more kind of utilitarian, that if you have the money, you're going to pay for something.
The sofa.
Exactly. That I'm going to use, and my money is well spent because I get to use it over and over and over again. So I'm experiences. For sure. My husband is things, for sure. We're opposite on all of these, which is so funny. I mean, we laugh and like compare our Christmas lists. Like our parents, God bless our parents. Our parents still buy all the adults gifts, which is very kind. But yeah, his mom's always like, give us a list of what you want for Christmas. But like, I laugh at his because mine is like literally a gift card for a massage. It's like my number one. I'm like, that's all I need. I love it. Thank you. And his is like light bulbs in the living room to connect to Alexa or something, like, you know what I mean? Like, exactly. Alexa, turn living room on. He's like, that's what I want. So he's like a gadget, an Apple TV, or like anything that he's like, we can use this over and over. Like our money is so well spent with having an item that we can use and it can enhance our life, where I'm like, no, take me to a nice dinner and I can spend there. And what's funny, Carey, is looking back at our marriage, like we've been married 11 years. And I remember that first year we got married super young. So we were on super tight budget, this young couple, I mean, right out of college, and we're just like figuring out. I remember we would go to dinner, and Winston for a solid year would not buy a drink at dinner. He wouldn't buy a glass of wine. He wouldn't buy a Coke, nothing. Because in his head, he's like, I can literally buy a 2-liter with what they're charging me, or I can go buy a bottle of wine for this glass of wine. Like, no, this is crazy. And I would get so frustrated because I'm like, just experience this with me. Like, I want you to enjoy it with me. And like, no, like, and we would just like miss each other all the time. And I'm like, are you judging me for buying like a lemonade at this restaurant? You know, like we would talk about it all the time, but I'm like, oh, if I had the language, I'd be like, no, it's just that he just doesn't value that stuff. It's not right or wrong. Mm-hmm. It's just not what he values, but I do value that. I love that stuff.
I think that's what's so helpful about this, because it would be easy to say, well, you're just greedy or acquisitive or vain, right? Like you could say that, like, I really value people, but you value that stupid car that you don't want to scratch on, right? That's where exactly it goes. Right. Do most people marry their opposite? Is that a pattern?
So. I mean, that cliche, like opposites attract.
Yeah.
We see it a lot. We see it a lot within money. Yeah.
Yeah. I would probably be somewhere in the middle, but tilting toward things. That if I have something tangible to show for it, and I'm that person, even if we go to drive-through, we're going to have to do it tonight heading to Toronto. I will bring a drink from home because I'm going to pay 42 cents for it, or whatever it is, as opposed to $1.42. And yet I wouldn't mind, buying a brand new iMac for $3,000, right? So it's not sensical. It doesn't make any sense. So never claim to be consistent. Okay, so experiences are things, quality or quantity? Mm-hmm.
Yes. So when you spend money, I always say like the game, if you had $100, would you go buy one nice thing, or would you go buy 8 different little things? Like where you naturally are bent towards. And so, I'm quantity. I would rather have, all the ladies out there, all you leaders, I'm like, I would rather have 18 pairs of cheap earrings than like 1 or 2 nice pairs of like real diamonds or something, right? Like just give me some, I'm good. I just want the variety. I want to enjoy it. Winston, again, is quality. I mean, he needs like 2 pairs of boots, and that's all he needs, but they're going to be nice. They're going to last years. And that's what he wants. And so again, the extremes can start to get bad, because I think quantity people, we can get stuck in this rut of like, we justify it. Oh yeah, but it's just $8, or like it has free shipping, so I'm just going to get this. Like, and you can kind of start to fill and scratch this itch, an unhealthy itch, which is buying stuff. And then your quality people, there's a point when you live so much in that world that like anything below average is like not good. Like I can't get X, Y, and Z. I can't get that watch because it's not this type of watch, or so you have to like watch the status level of how you're feeling. So
you just read my mind. It would be quality. Yeah. Okay. I think I started out quantity because, you're just trying to figure this out, but then, and you don't have any money and it's super tight. But like I'm at the stage of life now where, we live in, like I got the lawnmower of my dreams, and I would rather have one lawnmower that lasts a decade and it's really good and I don't have to worry about it. Same with my leaf blower and stuff like that. It's like, hey, I got it. Like, the leaf blower was $800. It's what the contractors use, but like, I'm going to use that thing for 15 or 20 years. Right. And so I think I'm getting to that stage of my life, but you're right. There is a snobbery that can go along with that too. It's like, well, I wouldn't have one of those. And well, there you go. So this is really good awareness. And okay, we'll keep going. Safety or status?
Yeah, so this is your motivation on why you want to win with money. So when you kind of start this process of like, okay, I want to get in control, I want to get out of debt and budget and all this. Well, why? And people kind of fall in 2 camps. Either it's a safety reason that I just want to feel secure. Like I don't need anything in life. I just want to feel like my money is not stressful, that it is secure. That's all I want. I want security. And then some people are status, which status sounds bad. I don't mean it to be bad.
It does sound like a sin. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I tried to find a different word for it and nothing came to mind when I was writing it.
But describe it, because I've heard you describe it. It's helpful.
Is just, I will win with money and make sacrifices so that I can do something better after. So I lean on the status side. I'm like, I will budget all day long and I will save as long as I know I'm budgeting for something fun, or we're saving money to go on a fun vacation, or like we're going to do something. The sacrifice is worth it because we get to do something better with it. We can advance our life with it. I don't know what Winston would be necessarily on this, honestly, but I think of my sister, Denise, she is security all the way. Like Denise, I mean, we know each other way too much and know every detail of our lives. But I'm like, her and her husband have been talking about building this deck for 3 years and they can pay for the deck. And I'm like, build the deck, Denise. And she's like, wow, it just feels good to have the money in the bank. I'm like, it's fine. Like, go build the deck. Like, oh my God, it drives me crazy. But for her, I'm like, she's like, I don't really need the deck. I would rather have this like safety and security of like, it's all here. And it feels good. That feels good.
Well, and that's interesting because you raise another point. I asked that earlier question about like stories of origin, but like same house, same parents, same story. You lean towards status. She leans towards security. My wife is definitely more security. I'm probably more status on that. It's like, I don't mind saving, but you got to show me why, because otherwise I'll spend it or give it away. And, we don't want to go bankrupt. No, we don't. But like, I would, yeah. Okay, well, that's really good to know. And that's not necessarily a bad thing either. It's just like, yeah, it's going to get us to what we hope to do. Love this one. Abundance or scarcity. I think that's such a massive, like that's books in itself right there. Abundance or scarcity. So define what you mean, because that would be a term that a lot of people are used to. But what do you mean about it in the context of money?
Yes. Well, scarcity, I mean, it's more of a limited mindset, right? That there's only so much money here. And the idea of going and getting more and having more, it's just not natural. It's not your natural bent. Or abundance is that, oh yeah, there's always more of everything. So we're okay to do this because there's always more. And what's interesting is a lot of people shun the scarcity. I feel like there's a movement of like, have an abundance mindset. And there's truth to that. There really is. But again, I didn't want to make this a moral right or wrong. Yeah. And so as I was writing it out, I realized there are like Winston is scarcity and I'm abundance. And he's self-admittedly, I mean, he would definitely say that is where he leans. But what he does to me is we balance each other out, but there's parts of the scarcity mindset that are so wise. They take their time. They really think through what's going on. They get a lot of information before they do something. I mean, there's a level of this like kind of investigator mindset with people. Some people are just, the unhealthy side of scarcity is just that extreme. Life is glass half empty. But if you have just a little bit of that tendency, you slow down. Where abundance, I'm like, I think every idea is a good idea within 3 minutes. And I'm like, I can just keep going. And I'm like, no, the slow down pace for the abundance and to know not every idea is a good idea. And sure, is there more money out there? Yeah. But again, if that's your only mindset, you have no boundaries or guardrails in life, and that's unhealthy. So there's good parts and bad parts to each of those for sure.
Mm-hmm. I'm definitely abundance, and I think it could have gotten me in trouble. I'm probably on the extreme end, both in leadership and in life. I'm like, well, we can always figure that out in the future. And then, the people with a little more on the scarcity side are like, well, actually, you should really pay attention to the spreadsheet. It's like, oh, okay, all right, we'll slow down a little bit, right? But it's that kind of tension, right? And and then planned giving or spontaneous giving.
Yeah. So when you look at your giving, you're naturally bent one way or the other. Are you more planned? You want it thought through. That makes you feel good inside of like, yes, we are being wise. This is what we're giving to. You've researched it, And then the spontaneous giving is, every time you see someone, on the side of the road, you're like, oh, or you hear, this is me. I'm so bad at this. I get introduced to the most amazing organizations like all over the world doing incredible stuff, from like buying cribs for orphanages in the Caribbean to rescuing sex trafficking, all of it. And I'm like, I could just give, I'm like, yes. Like, we had a foster care adoption service at church like a year ago. I was pregnant. And I was looking over at Winston. I was like, I think we're called to this. And he's like, no, I think you're pregnant. And I think we need to have this baby first and then we'll talk. But like, I can be so spontaneous. So again.
So you're spontaneous. Interesting with giving. Because I would definitely be on the planned side, and it makes me feel unchristian. It's like, where is your heart? And it's like, it's there. And I try to be generous, but it's like, I'm going to pick my causes. And is it unusual for you to resent spontaneous giving if you're a planned giver person?
I bet so. And I was going to say, this is the one that I've probably melded into the middle. I think I'm naturally spontaneous, but my tactics are planned, but we've planned spontaneous giving. So we've like planned like a certain amount that like if something comes up, I can spontaneously give. So I can still like live in that. But I think over time though, this is one that mom and dad have modeled this really well in my life. But the giving part, it's just a responsibility. When you look at your life and your money as a stewardship, I'm like, if I spend more time investigating my investments for retirement than I do what I'm investing in the kingdom, that feels backwards to me. So part of me is like, there's a level of wisdom to really dig in and plan well. So I think I've moved medium to the plan side of it. Because I do think that that's wise. I mean, in all honesty, but there is a level where I'm like, if the spirit moves, like I want to be able to just give. So we've planned some spontaneous giving.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because we're talking to a lot of leaders today. I mean, obviously a lot of church leaders, some not-for-profit leaders, but and then lots of business leaders as well. But it would be interesting because, I, as a lead pastor, raised money for 20 years and I am naturally a planner. It's like, here's my tithe. This is what we're going to give. This is part of our budget. It's bedrock. Here's a couple of organizations we're going to give meaningfully to. And then here's some other money for like, oh, this person's in a race and this person, here's a cool cause. And so I'm very deliberate in my giving. And I think that actually ultimately can help you be more generous over time, I would hope. But I wonder if it has any implication to how you raise money, because in my mind, everybody should be that way. It's like, why aren't you giving it? Why haven't you budgeted that? But I realize not everybody behaves that way, right?
Exactly right. Yes. And that is a fascinating way to think as a leader. If you were in a position where you had to raise money, how that affects the way you do that even. I mean, yeah, I had never thought of that. But that is very fascinating.
Yeah. And so I wonder, because I think a lot of people are spontaneous givers. Like they saw a need and they went and, well, it's another book down the road. Okay.
Yes.
Let's talk about fears associated with money. You have a whole section on fears. Talk about a money fear or two that you would struggle with, and then some of the other ones that are pretty common.
Yes. Well, fear was an interesting part to write because every time I hear the word fear, I always associated it as a negative thing. It's a bad thing to have fear. And I was talking to Dr. Chip Dodd, and he said that fear is actually a gift. And fear is literally your body's response that you are in need of help. So if a bear is coming at you, the fear of like, I'm going to be eaten or I have to run is a good fear. That is a gift that you have this fear because it makes you spring into action. So some of these money fears, I realize, can really be gifts. If you can name it, see it, be able to communicate that this is a fear that's in you, you can actually make steps to help handle that fear. But that fear is really just a reaction to say something feels off. Do I need to do something different? Now, when it moves over into anxiety, then that kind of gets a red flag of like, yeah, that gets unhealthy. But just fear in itself can really be seen as a gift, which I love that viewpoint, that perspective. And so one of the fears I see the most common, especially among women, is the lack of security. So it's the fear that if something were to happen, am I going to be okay? And the state of personal finance in America is just, it's so sadly, so terrible. I mean, 78% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. 40% of Americans can't cover a $400 emergency in cash. Yeah. So like, there's a level of like, there might be insecurity with your money. And if that's a fear, then do something with that fear. What can you do? Can you get out of debt so you don't owe anyone anything? Can you save up that emergency fund? Like put things in place that help that fear subside. So maybe it's a way of saying, yeah, I need help in this. So there's that fear. There's the fear of I'll end up just like my parents. Yeah. I've heard this one, which is really interesting. We're talking about how you were raised, but yeah, I do meet people and we're like the sandwich generation where people are taking care of their own kids still at home. But their parents are reaching retirement age and they haven't planned for it. They don't have the money. So they're having to move back in. And it's like this whole dynamic. And I've had two friends that's happened to. And I remember them telling me, they're like, Rachel, I will never do this to my kids. Like, I won't do this. They're like, we can barely take care of our family. And now I have to take care of my parents. Like, but they feel obligated to, right? Because it's your parents. I mean, it's like this whole mess of a situation. And so many people have said, I will not end up like my parents. So that's a fear. There's a fear of external forces. AKA 2020, right? Election, pandemic, all of it. It's like because of what's going on in the outside world, like I'll never get ahead because of everything else that I can't control. And people can get stuck in that mindset very easily of like this, it's like this paralyzing fear that because of everything going on, I'm not going to be okay financially. And having to overcome that, say, okay, what things can you control in a good way? Like what are things that you can put into place that you can control and focusing on that versus the things that you can never control.
So, here we are at the beginning of a brand new year and we don't know what the future holds, but we do know that the financial crisis continues for a lot of people. Chris Hogan was on a few months ago and he shared that stat that the average retirement savings of boomers right now is about $10,000, which, is not going to last very long. I found that almost unbelievable. But I imagine like there's a lot of pastors living, there's a lot of entrepreneurs or listening, I should say. And, you know, they're boomers and they're like, yeah, I'm one of those people with 10,000 or less saved. What advice would you have for them if they're a little bit later in life? And I think this is also fueling the succession crisis that we have in the church and in businesses where it's got to work 5 more years. I got to work 10 more years. I don't want to, but I feel like I have to. Any advice for them who find older leaders, and we're going to talk about younger leaders, but older leaders who are in that insecurity place, and it's a real thing. And I have compassion for that. What would you say to them?
Yeah, it's so hard. I mean, it is it's a scary place to be able to, I would assume. I can't say I empathize with that because I'm not, you know, in that age range, but I'm like, that is a hard place to see because then everything else around you starts to feel like it's spiraling. Like, you know, one of the fears I talk about is like not realizing your dreams. And it's like this thing you always wanted to do, but time's running out. I mean, it's just this combination of so much. But I'd say, you know, on the basic level to get yourself in a position so that you can keep investing into retirement. So that is living on less than you make, being out of debt, getting that emergency fund, and be funding retirement, doing what you can to make that a priority. I think that's huge because it's never too late. I mean, you hear that phrase, but it's true. I'm like, if you're still breathing, you're still alive. So like, let's do something with what we have to come. And so be focusing on that. That would be one of definitely my biggest pieces of advice.
When someone's in that situation, what would a really, like, I know you got the 7 baby steps, the 7 steps that you guys talk about all the time, but they're like, yeah, but I'm not 25 anymore. So what would you say is like, one of the best first steps that they could take? Would it be to see a financial planner? Would it be to like, what would you suggest?
Yeah, well, no matter the age, we'd still walk you through those 7 steps for sure. Right. But when it gets to that future, yeah, I think sitting down with a financial advisor, just like you said, to see the landscape and to say, okay, what is it all I have? Because some people don't even have everything out visually. I'm like, there's like random debts over here that you kind of have, but you don't really know how much. There's like a random account over here. I don't know, like get everything out on the table and have an advisor walk you through and look at the math and just say, okay, how much do I need to invest per year to live on X amount, whatever that is for you? And looking at your lifestyle now, currently, all of it. So having someone kind of guide with you, whether that's a financial coach or a financial advisor, I would get with someone else. So it's not just you and your spouse working on that, like get a third party in there.
And that can really help mediate all the 7 differences too, right? The money tendencies. It's like you just get an independent person. We found that so helpful in our own walk as well. You know, my wife, Tony, and I. Let's talk to young leaders for a minute because that is the bulk of this audience. And one of the things I love about following you on social, your dad, the Ramsey Group, is you have all these stories of, you know, you got the debt free scream, they're there, and the amounts blow me away. Like they're paying off $50,000, $100,000 of debt in like a period of months, not decades. So speak to some young leaders there that are listening about how 2021 could be that. Like, you know, they're not making $200,000 a year and paying off $200,000 in debt. So how do those spectacular stories happen? Like, what is the story behind the story?
Yes. Oh, I love this so much. Because like you said, it's every range of debt, every range of income. And you're like, how did you do this?
Yeah.
So I think that I think the theme though is a level of short-term sacrifice. So you have to be willing to say, you know what, for a short period of time, on average, people get out of debt in 12 to 18 months. So on average, you need a year and a half to say, you know what, this 2021 is the year of sacrifice. And I'm going to, scorch earth. I'm going to live on nothing. I'm going to make extra income where I can. And it's amazing what that short-term sacrifice does long-term. Like I look at those families and they have those boards with like their debt amount and stuff. Yeah. And I'm like, and now they don't have debt. So when your income comes in, it's your largest wealth building tool. Your income comes in, you get to invest that and you get to give that. Like you get to do things with your income versus paying for the past. But it takes a level of sacrifice, but it's just for the short term. And like people laugh all the time, like you said, everyone thinks the Ramseys would be like, yeah, savers, they're the best ones. And so people are like, Rachel, look, I got my Ramsey Solutions car. And it's like this beater. And I'm like, no, why is that your Ramsey Solutions car? No, go buy a new Mercedes after you get out of debt. And that could be your Ramsey Solution. So like, there's a better life. And we encourage like, live a great life after it's done. But in order to live that great life, live like no one else. You first have to live like no one else and you have to look different. You're going to be weird. It's going to be hard, but it's so worth it. That's short-term sacrifice for long-term gain. And then what ends up happening is for so many people, your stuff comes into perspective and you start to realize when you start selling off stuff and, become a minimalist for a year. I don't care. Like, just get rid of everything. And it's like, there's this level of like, wow, our stuff has us under control. I mean, to a place that I don't feel like you realize until you have to sacrifice and let it go. And so there's an emotional, spiritual crafting that comes in the process as well that people don't talk about, but it's there and it's huge.
Money is very spiritual, and it is one of the under reported sort of sides of money for sure. Okay, I know we're coming to the end of our time together, and you've been so generous. Any other aha moments? It's a substantial book. It's not like there's real meat to it, and it's super helpful. It's practical, but any other aha moments that really surprised you as you put this piece together?
Yeah, for me personally, I think as I was writing, the beginning part, it talks about your childhood, these tendencies. We talked on fears, grace and behavior change. And then the last half of the book is talking about spending, saving, and giving, why we do those things and how they attach to other parts of our life. So the spending one for me always is convicting. I'm like writing to myself when I write it. But I realized through it, I was like, man, are you into the Enneagram, Carey?
Oh, yeah. I'm an 8.
Okay. You're a what?
8.
An 8. Okay. I'm a 3.
Okay.
So as I was doing it, I was finding myself, I used the Enneagram a little bit through a filter of like, kind of understanding people as I was writing it. Because for me, spending, one of my aha moments was I've learned to ask the question, if nobody sees this purchase, would I still buy it?
Ooh.
And so that was convicting for me. And I like wrote that out in the book as a 3. And I thought, oh God, that's so good. I need to remember that. Like, so ever since the manuscript, I keep asking myself that. So that was one aha moment to see.
That's a great question.
Making sure that my motivations are pure in a purchase, because it's okay to buy a new pair of shoes or a new car, but like what is it really for? And so that was one of my personal aha moments.
That is a great question. I've had a similar thing in the back of my mind because I tend to be a little bit OCD even with cleaning up. And I'm like, who is this for? Like, are you trying to impress some invisible person or some person in your past? Or like, what are you trying to do? Those are really... And there's no easy answer to that, right? You can ask that question for a long, long time.
Yep, absolutely. Yes.
Tell us about the book and where people can find you and it, Rachel.
Yes. Know Yourself, Know Your Money came out January 5th. And so I can't wait for everyone to read it. You can go to rachelcruze.com. You can go anywhere books are sold. It'll be there. And I have a podcast, The Rachel Cruze Show, and a video version of it on YouTube and Facebook. And
everywhere.
We'll start the new year. That's it.
For those of you who are watching on YouTube, here's a copy. This is an advanced copy, but it's a really great book, and you helped a lot of leaders today. Rachel, once again, thank you so much.
Thanks, Carey. Thanks for having me.
Well, I hope today's episode was helpful to you. You can always get more by subscribing to my channel. I also have a lot more content over at careynieuwhof.com for leaders in business and leaders in churches. And you can get transcripts of this episode there and so much more, plus some other stuff I do for leaders. So head on over there to discover more at careynieuwhof.com. And in the meantime, I really hope our time together today has helped you lead like never before.